I'm Lawrence Wintermeyer. I'm the chair of Global Digital Finance. We are a not-for-profit members association, and these particular issues, in particular R16 of the travel rule, first hit me in June 2018 when we were getting calls from supranational agencies giving us a bit of a hint or a tip that the G20 were particularly concerned about exchanges, which bothered me a bit at the time. We were just starting to experience crypto winter. The whole market cap for crypto assets was about 250 billion, to which my response is, isn't this a bit disproportional in that there was a single bank in Estonia that had allegedly just laundered 250 billion, and wouldn't it be maybe more important to focus on what was going on in the real financial system rather than pick on exchanges? Thank you very much. Which led to my own narrative around the disproportional effect of supranational rules on the industry, which frankly nobody was interested in other than my friend here. So we're in a situation now where we're in compliance mode. And so I'd like to allow each of the panelists to introduce themselves, speak specifically for a couple of minutes about their companies and what they do before we kick in and sort of blow the lid off of MLD5 and R16 of the effect of the travel rule. Veronica?
Sure. I'm Veronica McGregor. I am the Chief Legal Officer at ShapeShift. We are a crypto trading platform, and we are strictly crypto to crypto. We don't deal with fiat. We also don't take custody. We're a non-custodial platform. And we are based in UK, Switzerland. We also have a company in Switzerland and United States.
Hi everyone, my name is Oliver Tonkin, co-founder and general counsel, head of compliance at PCB Group. We are an OTC liquidity provider, and we also provide payment services for crypto businesses, so exchanges, any other business that's exposed to the crypto space and can't get banked, we can help. Yeah, that's it.
Okay, hello everyone. My name is Elsa Madrolle. I work for CoolBitX, which is a Taiwan-based cryptocurrency security company. We have two major lines of business currently. The first is a wallet business. We have a non-custodial wallet. We're working on a custodial wallet solution. The second line of business is actually a travel rule solution that's a live technology that is currently in the process of being adopted by a number of exchanges in Asia.
That's great, Elsa, and thanks. I need to remember to stop calling you guys CoolBitX, which probably sounds uncool to you, but it was a great name. And we've got an excellent global representation in this panel today on the topic. So I'm going to start with you, Oliver, and we'll start in Europe. And so my sense was, while the global exchange or VASP community started to get concerned about the FATF travel rule in R16, many weren't paying attention to something called MLD5 or AMLD5, which superseded AMLD4 and came into effect in January of 2020. And so can you start with us and give us a sort of an indication of what you think the implications are on MLD5 on the crypto digital asset sector?
So, I mean, as I said in intro, I mean, our business does focus around helping crypto businesses, so that's VASPs and any other business that's involved in the space, to make payments. So that's in and out of the crypto markets primarily, and that does require us to, when we're onboarding someone, to have quite a deep dive as to what they actually do right now on KYC and AML. In terms of the market here, this is true in the UK and really anywhere else in Europe. You've got a small number of quite big, quite well-funded businesses with quite good compliance infrastructure, and it drops off quite quickly. So when you're looking at people's processes that they say they use, I mean, everyone tries to be compliant. This is pre-January, and it's still true now. Everyone tries to be compliant, I would say. 95% of people try to be compliant. Some people are compliant, and then there's quite a few people that maybe they've got a bit more work to do.
Sure.
And I'm conscious that the clock's ticking on this, and you're going to get to the end of 2020, and certainly in the UK, at that point, either you're registered or you've got to stop business. And my suspicion would be that there will be quite a big drop-off in the number of people in the market doing that business, because they're just not going to be able to convince the FCA or any other national regulator elsewhere in the European Union that they really are doing the right thing and they really have the systems, controls, and infrastructure to actually do it. I mean, I could be wrong, but I mean that's my feeling. I think you'll see a big drop-off in either an amalgamation, or there'll be some kind of buying up, or just stop business.
So the hypothesis here, your hypothesis here is really there's a long tail, and that by the time we get to the end of 2020, many firms aren't going to simply be able to make the cut in complying.
I suspect that's true.
Okay, excellent. I'm going to go to you, Elsa. Maybe we can extend it from MLD5 again back into FATF, because it's a similar question in, what are the big implications from your perspective for exchanges or for the industries as a result of FATF travel rule?
It's interesting because obviously Asian exchanges for the large majority don't feel like they should be concerned with AMLD5 when actually it's going to depend country by country. It may well be that they have clients that reside in a particular country that decides to that they're implicated as well. So it's not something they can completely ignore. So what we tend to tell them is to obviously, stay in touch with the regulation. Where are we going to get, quote unquote, hit with regulation geographically? What are the requirements? And then really this is key, I think, for anyone currently in the industry is do a cost-benefit analysis. What's going to be the cost of complying? What are the benefits, as in what kind of business are we likely to lose? What kind of business are we likely to gain? And then really it's comply, move, or close.
So this is a good point that you make then. I'm an Asian exchange. I'm registered in Asia, but I have European clients for the sake of this argument. What are my particular requirements in the context of MLD5?
And that's going to depend on each individual regulator and how they decide to interpret AMLD5. I think one of the things to remember is that AMLD is a directive. It is not a regulation. GDPR is a regulation. So that little word, directive, means that there is quite a wide berth for a country to impose its own kind of political agenda and really cater the regulation to what they want. An interesting example is Germany. So Germany just issued its regulation, and it's really, really intensely focused on custody, on custodians. Well, that's because historically, German custodians, Depotbanks, et cetera, have had in traditional markets, a much broader remit than your traditional custodian in another country. So it's not surprising that Germany, the German regulator, would take that kind of traditional German agenda and apply it, layer it within AMLD5. And so you're going to have that in country by country.
And while here in the UK, it's more about trading, which is I didn't know that. I think that's really interesting.
Mm-hmm.
So we would just finish up on this segment before we come to Veronica. I think January was the date for jurisdictional transposition. Is there a leading pack of regulators in Europe, in your view, that has really gone out in front with their own proposed approach to the directive?
I think it's interesting you mentioned AMLD4. You didn't mention AMLD6, which is arriving in December. And in every EU kind of directive that comes out, et cetera. Sorry, I'm close to the topic, as you can tell. In every EU directive that comes out, there's always a leading pack, and then there's always the bulk, and then there are always some stragglers. There are still countries that have not complied with AMLD4.
Yeah. I mean, it was interesting though. I mean, AMLD5 was actually transposed into some countries early. So so Estonia got in very early, probably because they wanted to get ahead of the pack in terms of actually getting market share rather than any particular, altruistic, motives. But you're absolutely right. I mean, some people are laggards because they just are slow, but some people have got in ahead because they want the business.
Yeah, so we're in a multi-speed environment between 4 and 6. Broadly.
And what you want ideally is for a national regulator to implement regulation or to issue regulation that covers both AMLD5 and FATF. And the UK has tried to do that, but with the caveat that the travel rule doesn't quite apply yet because we're not ready. So that's a pretty big gap that that's missing from that regulation.
Great. So let's take that key message away in that we've got a convergence gap with MLD5 and the FATF travel rule, if you didn't have enough to concern yourselves with. And Veronica, a US-based operation, but from Switzerland. No?
Well, technically, we are holding companies in Switzerland, but the platform is based here in UK.
In the UK.
Yeah,
Right.
operations in US, platforms in UK, trading platforms here.
Got it. So what are the implications of MLD5 for ShapeShift?
Well, so the implications, as was just discussed, depends on where your users are, right? We are a global platform, so we have users everywhere, and so your choices are to either sort of figure out what's the most compliant you can be, kind of lowest common denominator, and just do that, and figure you'll be compliant everywhere if you do that, or you can try to comply jurisdiction by jurisdiction, but that's really impractical. So as a platform, we, a historical note is that ShapeShift did 0 in terms of KYC until I came on board and we started. I wanted to de-risk the company. We did 0 in terms of KYC or AML before, because it was crypto to crypto, and all you needed was a send receive address. So now that it's a more robust platform, and we do AML, we KYC, we do all that, and we are working on a gap analysis between what we already do and what we're going to have to do under AMLD5. We have some time before we have to fully comply, and the same is, well, yeah. So that's what it's all about, where the users are, and we're just basically going to end up.
And am I right in thinking you were one of the earlier exchanges to implement AMLD or the KYC bit?
Yeah, and we paid dearly for that, by the way. I don't know if we were one of the earlier ones. Depends on, Coinbase was, certainly doing that early on. But we're non-custodial. That also makes it a little safer for users, and there were some sort of loopholes there for a bit, and there still are. Not loopholes as in they shouldn't be there, but as in we don't really fall under, like, some of the laws in America are money transmitter laws, and those carry with them concerns about consumers, and our consumers never have their funds at risk. The federal level, you have FinCEN, and they have anti-money laundering laws and regs, and so that's what we have to comply with.
Great. So that sets us up for FATF and R16. And so what's the thinking at ShapeShift around the preparation for the travel rule?
Yeah, so it's been very difficult because, as everyone knows, cryptocurrency is basically at its core was either anonymous or pseudonymous kind of operation, and so it's hard. It's a little bit hard for us to retrofit. Figure out how to comply, and so we're going to be leaning pretty heavily on standard setting bodies like GDF, like yours, and some of the vendors who can maybe help us out trying to make sure that we can actually attach the information we need to attach under not just FATF travel rule, but also we already had a travel rule. FinCEN had a travel rule, so.
Well, that's great for you to mention. Global Digital Finance, in partnership with Chamber of Digital Commerce and IDAXA, have set up something called an independent joint working group. And I believe there are about 110 or 115 participants now on it. But it's particularly focused on agreeing a common message payload for the FATF travel rule. So it's not at the protocol level, it's not at the the solution level where we expect to be a number of them, but indeed, I think we're all hopeful that we've got a reasonable agreement in industry around a data payload standard, but we'll get to that point in May. And Elsa, I just want to jump back to you then and on to R16 and the travel rule, if we're talking about bridging MLD 5 to 6 and the travel rule, and how well is industry prepared for any of this at this stage? And again, back to the point Oliver is making, do you see a a quorum of adopters and a long tail coming afterwards that you think might be difficult to pick these things up, mainly because of the expense and the time it takes to get technical solutions in place to comply?
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is definitely different levels of readiness and preparedness and willingness to engage across the globe. So regulation helps, but I'll give you an example of our experience in South Korea. So we were looking to meet exchanges in South Korea who just kept pushing back, saying, well, regulation's not there, regulation's not there. As of March 5th, it's announced that regulation is there. Suddenly we have a deluge of incoming inquiries. So then it becomes about the solution itself, the travel rule solution itself, to beat recommendation 16. How complicated is your onboarding process, and is it going to differ country by country? There are a number of solutions in the market, so really exchanges should be doing due diligence before selecting one vendor, and that's a long, complicated process. So I think it's not necessarily going to be as smooth as like a normal distribution with a long curve. There are just some entities that are really, really keen to demonstrate to their regulator for whatever reason that they're ready ahead of time, and then others that are still fighting back. I mean, I always compare it to the 5 stages of cancer, right? We're still in the denial phase in many cases.
That's an extraordinary analog. I have to borrow that one as it's a bit morbid, particularly in the context of what's going on.
We'll
with
get into
COVID-19.
permission. It's okay.
But I want to pick it up because we're on this topic anyway, and looking at the particular circumstances in which there may be some leniency in FATF and the R16 implementation. And then we're all trying to comprehend the impact of COVID-19, and we're talking about the unintended consequences of markets and the way markets behave with this. Do you think that there will be any dispensation at all, or any leniency when it comes to FATF's schedule going into the end of 2020 with R16?
So that's interesting. So FATF meets in June to decide next steps.
Might have to meet by video though, rather than video conference, rather than in full plenary.
It was going really well until the coronavirus hit. Yeah. In terms of industry was speaking to the regulators in a much more coordinated fashion. I think we as an industry, via all the working groups, have made tremendous progress. We've been, the regulators have been educating themselves, and there have been a number of countries that have issued consultations out to the market to gain feedback, et cetera. So I thought it was, personally, I thought it was going very well, and I didn't expect FATF to be issuing any delays or giving us, a wider landing strip. I can give you an example of going back to South Korea, because this is just in the news, just lately. So the South Korean National Assembly was leaked to the press that they were going to have to delay issuing the regulation due to the virus, because they had shut down the assembly for 2 days and they were allegedly too busy to be able to complete this in time. Within 48 hours of that article being leaked to the press, they absolutely completed the decision. It was a unanimous decision to publish the amendment that now completely complies with FATF regulation. So the industry's this is now going to, it needs to be signed by the president in the next 2 weeks. The industry will have 1 year plus a 6-month grace period. So they have not delayed despite false rumors. And I think as FATF sees that countries are proceeding, even countries like South Korea that have been very hit by unexpected circumstances, I don't think they will push back, but obviously when we see the markets in complete disarray, and I guess that remains to be seen how it plays out in the next few weeks.
Yeah. Sorry, Veronica, did you have a point out of that?
No, it's an interesting idea that regulation would be potentially delayed by this pandemic, but it's actually quite a valid concern, because if regulatory bodies can't meet and people aren't going to work, then it makes sense that such a thing would be delayed. But the thing that it's trying to combat, right, the actual underlying, money laundering and other financial crimes, will not take a rest and will not be quarantined. So it's a very interesting tension that it's sort of that unanticipated consequences thing. I'm just thinking it's very interesting that until you raised it.
Yeah, again, unless you're a risk or asset manager, you're not particularly, and have traded through a lot of volatile markets,
Right.
probably not focused on the unintended consequences and, sitting around doing the hypothetical planning that you need to do. But it's quite an extraordinary time for that, from that perspective. So I think we should watch this space. Oliver, if we move on now and change gears, we're through COVID. It's 2 or 3 years from now. We're all happy, rosy. The stock market's back and keeping the president of the U.S. happy. What are the implications for firms that you work with in terms of opportunities in more mainstream institutional partnering, greater degree of liquidity? Coming into crypto and digital assets, more mature products. From your perspective, is it easy to see that now, or see where that direction of travel is going, or is it?
I've been asked this question before. Is AMLD5 going to increase institutional appetite for the space? And I don't really know. That's a really sort of rubbish answer, but it might do. I think if you look at the spectrum of institutions who are looking to sort of play in the space, lack of regulation is an issue. Issues with kind of market transparency is an issue. Money laundering concerns, it's an issue. It's probably not the main issue stopping people from dipping their toe in, I would say. If you get rid of the concern and take it away, it's one less reason to say no, I suppose. But is it going to sort of open the floodgates and you're suddenly going to get wholesale, so mainstream investment fund, institutional interest in crypto per se? I would say not. I could be wrong again, but I would be surprised if that were the kind of the finger in the dike that you put it out and it will suddenly flow through. I think there are other issues around. Everything I hear people say as to why they are worried about the space is, again, because of it's a market that's still quite easily manipulated.
Yeah.
And it's still very thin. There are things that you can do and get off scot-free in the markets, like spoofing and stuff, that if you did it in a normal market, you go to prison. So I think people are more concerned around that than they are around, they're worried about accidentally buying some Bitcoin that was in a wallet that was involved in some kind of scam. I don't see that as being an overwhelming concern for people.
So what are what's the answer then? We get on the other side of this. We're all compliant now. What does that mean for us, other than we're bearing more costs and presumably there's a better degree of transparency from a regulatory perspective?
It might make banking easier. It might do.
Yeah.
I think it isn't going to happen tomorrow. That you're suddenly going to find all the high street mainstream banks are going to suddenly say, fine, we can open accounts for you now. That's not going to happen tomorrow. It's a suck it and see thing, I suppose. Let's see what happens if it does. Then there's people that do this analysis, and they can see where wallets are being used that can be traced back to illegal activity. If that problem really does disappear, over the next 1, 2, 3 year period, because this is happening. It might make banking easier, and it might remove the kind of smell over the market a little bit, because there is that perception, isn't there? If people who aren't particularly educated, you speak to politicians, for example, in this country, who really know,
in
this country, not just in this country.
If I'm honest, their understanding of this isn't very good. But the one thing they do know is, it's a money laundering scam.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I just came out of a meeting with an advocacy group that the chap started the sentence saying politicians actually aren't very smart and don't know much. So this is your first point of principle when
working. It's appallingly bad. Certainly in the UK, it's appallingly bad.
It's not just the UK.
Yeah.
To answer the liquidity question, I'm not sure I'm prepared to answer that, but But as far as the more regulation that there is in place and more evidence that people in the industry are complying with it, will lighten or lessen the stigma, I should think. A lot of it is perception.
The pool's
right.
safe to go
Right,
in.
exactly. So it'll be easier for companies in the industry like ShapeShift to get bank accounts and insurance and all the normal things that normal companies have
Insurance
no
too,
trouble
that's a good
getting.
point.
Yeah.
Insurance.
I mean, listen, trying to get get an audit, a financial audit of a crypto company is really tough because there's stigma, there's a lot of uncertainty, and a lot of misunderstanding or zero understanding of what the technology is and what the industry is trying to do. And I've certainly spoken to my share of politicians in the U.S., so I can't speak to the U.K. as you did, but I can say this: same problem. They don't understand it, and in many cases, they don't want to understand it. It's too complicated.
Sure, go ahead. Yeah, financial audit.
Financial audit.
You're talking about
getting a firm of accountants.
Fiduciary rather than
it's
code
really
audit.
hard.
Why don't you use EY?
So I didn't hear the question.
Why do you not
for
use
like a bank account or for an auditor?
Why do you use Ernst & Young?
Oh, we tried a number of different. We have an auditor now. We've almost completed our audit, but all crypto companies are not on the same level, and EY depend. It's literally all of risk analysis for them.
The onboarding is quite different.
Yeah, onboarding is
firms,
different.
even though they
and what he's saying is EY has shown itself to be interested in crypto and willing to do such things. And bravo to them, right? But
you don't work with EY, do you?
It's free and why?
Right, he's Mr. Ernst. But
I was going to say, weren't you at the panel I did last week? You're a reg panel.
We have another
or
chair.
Something?
But the question's a good one. If a company has said, yes, we're willing to be part of this industry, we want to offer services to this industry, that is a statement they can make, but that doesn't mean that they won't want, they don't create other barriers, ridiculous fees or other things like that. And the onboarding is tough as well. So it depends. But
does it?
Yeah, it's really quite subjective.
And then again, the distribution on onboarding with Big Four firms and crypto firms is massive. I mean, in the UK, a lot of banks have a difficult time taking on fintechs before we even get to crypto. So it's a big topic in itself. But Veronica, just one other question. I've had the privilege, and these are all GDF members, which I'm grateful for you for doing the panel for. So we're always discussing all sorts of interesting things. But in the context of ShapeShift, I've had the pleasure of doing fireside chats with Eric and speaking to Eric about things. And I think most of you will know Eric Voorhees is really, one of the outspoken libertarians, particularly in the crypto and Bitcoin space, as an economist as well.
He really loves talking about regulation.
Yeah, well, he's not here, is he? I asked him if he wanted to come to talk about MLD5, but he was
I actually probably told him he wasn't allowed to
Yeah,
come.
I think he was getting his hair cut today or something.
He's sock laundered.
Yeah. But just on this topic and putting aside liquidity, I suspect that ShapeShift is probably in a different position or has a different view. But in the context of the future and institutions, onboarding new platforms or venues that are AMLD5 or FATF travel rule compliant, is that something that you see happening over the next 24, 36 months, or is that one of those, we're really going to have to wait to see?
Wait, let me see if I understand. You're asking if ShapeShift will be compliant with these things in the next 12?
No, I'm saying put ShapeShift aside, given Eric's view of things.
There you go.
Do you think there's an opportunity for other exchanges or platforms or trading venues with this compliance requirement we're seeing with MLD5 or the FATF travel rule to develop partnerships with institutions in any capacity?
Well, let me not put ShapeShift aside, because there's a couple of things I want to make sure are understood. Eric, as a human being and a person, holds these very strong libertarian views. But as a CEO of a company, he's responsible for making sure that we manage risk properly. And I am the chief legal officer, and I am a 20-year payments lawyer and a regulatory lawyer. So Eric and I have thoughtful discussions about how we're going to comply, but comply we will. And
No,
so
I'm
when
sure
you're
you
saying,
will. I'm
will
sure
we,
you
if we have
will
to do it through
comply,
bank
but
partners?
you're not going to be doing deals with
We
tier
might.
one banks? Oh, okay.
We might, because
Excellent.
because that's becomes a business question, doesn't it? And if it turns out that we can partner with a traditional institution in order to accomplish what we need to accomplish in a more efficient or economical way, we would absolutely consider
Well,
it.
I
Nothing's
love it.
off the table.
You've heard it here. And Elsa, if we look to your view of the Asian landscape and exchanges, and the same question, are there opportunities here, post regulation when everyone is compliant, for partnerships or greater growth, and where might they be?
Yeah, I think absolutely. It's actually how we came into this business. Our majority shareholder is SBI. SBI, the Japanese financial services firm. So it is a bank. It is also a virtual asset exchange.
With 40 or 50 companies in their portfolio.
Correct.
It's a significant digital blockchain portfolio,
Yes.
isn't it?
So they've invested in literally 360 degrees of the blockchain infrastructure. And they're also one of our major clients. And it was through this literally partnership, because we're now going to open offices literally in their building, in Japan, et cetera. So it's through this partnership that we realized we had built something that could be adapted slightly and actually be compliant with the travel rule. They force us to think out the box. They force us to think like an institution. And those are very, very valuable partnerships. So I do expect additional, it's a way for the crypto industry to grow up, and it won't be for everybody, and it won't be for libertarians. But if we want, I always bring this back to my former experience. I came from the derivatives markets in traditional finance. And from my perspective, when I was working at CME, I used to say to clients, we want you to trade on exchange, of course. We want you to trade listed products. If you choose to trade OTC products, that's great. What we want is for the industry to be alive and have volume and drive volume. So we're kind of in the same situation here where, if listed products are going to be too onerous and et cetera, you might see a bifurcation into more of the OTC side. It doesn't matter. We as an industry need to encourage that because we need more volumes to come on board. So to increase flows to the industry, we're going to have to regulate part of it. And through these partnerships, we'll really understand where the opportunity is. So.
I always like to remind everyone that with my own bias towards derivatives, it's the largest aggregate market. I think even if you tot everything else up, including the debt markets, so pay attention to that point. Can I ask the panelists to take a minute? We've got a minute each, and just finish with your key 2 or 3 sage words of advice for the audience on getting through the next.
Besides,
12
wash
or
your
24
hands.
months.
Apparently, that is sage advice we all have to remember.
Sorry, what was that?
Wash your hands.
Wash your hands, excellent.
More sage.
Does anyone know how to do the wash your hands song from the
Wash your
BBC?
hands song.
Yeah. Excellent. Top tip.
You want to start, Elsa?
I think as we were talking about, potentially some entities having to shut down or having to move, et cetera, as you're going through that process, really stop, take a breather, and think, build, partner, or buy. Because there are 3 options, and you don't necessarily have to shut down. Maybe the answer is just partner.
Right.
So there will be consolidation, but really take time out to study and think of who you are in the ecosystem.
That's a great tip. Oliver?
Yeah, you stole my one. I absolutely agree. There's a lot of exchanges, liquidity providers out there who the clock's ticking for them basically, and educate yourself. Get some advice as to what you really do need to do. As Elsa says, there are products from basic KYC, tools, verification platforms, all the way to this the kind of thing that the law firm does on the travel rule stuff. It exists, but clock's ticking. You've got to get it in place pretty damn quick, or else you're going to have to lock up shop and go home.
Well, partner, clock's ticking. You want to finish, Veronica?
Well, I literally was going to say, it's always build, buy, or partner. But I guess compliance is cheaper than non-compliance, basically. It just is.
Depends on who
Unless
your
you're out of
lawyer
business.
is, I think.
No, well,
Yeah.
I'm just saying, right, or you go out of business. But your choice is even GDPR, the fines for non-compliance are pretty steep. So, I'm
That was perfect.
Perfect, look at that, brilliant.
Well, I would
had
love
slide
to
over.
thank CryptoCompare for this excellent event and the opportunity to speak to you today. On behalf of GDF, I'd like to thank all of you, our members here, for joining this panel. And I've always wanted to do a panel with Hugh Grant. I didn't think in my life it would be possible, but it's
Nice
happened
job,
today.
Oliver.
So, and a crypto compliance expert as well. So thank you very much to my panel, and thank you very much to the audience for listening to us today. Thank you.